Hello and welcome to the Edupedia world. In this tutorial, we are going to cover the part 4 of exception handling in Java. So in this tutorial, we are going to see two of a major topic. One is rethrowing the exception and other is creating your own exception. So let's begin. The first topic is rethrowing same exception. So that means if there is an exception that is thrown and we are again throwing the same exception again. So let's see how can we do that. Well, just as you can throw a new exception from a catch clause, you can also throw the same exception you just caught. So this is an example. You can see we are having a catch and inside the catch we are throwing the same exception using throw E. Okay, so we can even throw a new exception, but we can also throw a same exception. Okay, all other catch clauses associated with the same try are ignored. So if we do that, all other catch clauses will be ignored, and if finally block exists, it runs and the exception is thrown back to the calling method. Okay. The next method down the call stack. So in this case, what change will happen is the exception will be thrown back to the calling method. Although you are handling it in your catch clause, but it will be still thrown to the calling method because you did throw E over here. Okay. So if you throw a checked exception from a catch clause, you must also declare that exception. In other words, you must handle and declare as opposed to handle or declare. Fine. So this is an example of a illegal rethrowing. So you can see over here we are doing public void do stuff. Then we are having try. In try you can do any risky IO things. Then you are having a catch block which is throwing IO exception EX. Okay. Now we can't handle it. Therefore what we did is throw EX. Now can't rethrow, can't throw it unless you declare it. So what it is saying is, in preceding code, the doStuff method is clearly able to throw a checked exception. Okay, in this case, which is IO exception. So the compiler says, well, that's just peachy that you have a try and a catch in there, but it's not good enough. If you might rethrow an exception, then you must declare it. So that means you should also declare that exception. Okay, let's try to do the same thing in our Eclipse IDE and see how we can declare it. So now let me create a class over here. I'm going to my package and doing new class. And the class name that I'm giving is exception rethrow demo. Let me have a main also in this. And now let me create a method over here. So in this method, I'm actually taking two numbers and I'm doing their sum. Now let me have a try. Although I'm not doing any heavy stuff over there, but just to show you that I'm doing something, let me assume that I'm doing some IO stuff over here, but I'm actually simply adding two numbers. Okay. Just to maintain a simplicity of the code. Otherwise, if you're doing some heavy stuff, then you actually need the try catch. From heavy stuff, I mean you should actually do the exception handling everywhere although. But over here, I don't have a need, but still I'm doing it, which is fine. So, okay, in catch block, let me just print out something. So, I'm printing out some catch block. And then let me throw the same exception. So what I'm doing is I'm throwing the same exception and now let me call this sum method. Let me not create an object. So, to avoid creating an object, let me change this method to static. Now let me simply call the sum method over here. So you see, I did that. Now let me try to simply run it. So since I'm not printing anything out here, let me just, do some sysout over here so that I get to know where my stuff is happening. And just to do some exception, let me also do C divide by 0 so that I actually get some exception. Okay, because I'm doing divide by 0, so it should give me an exception. So see, when I did C is 8, so it actually printed out that since C is coming out to be 8 after adding. Then we are getting an exception because I'm doing divide by 0. So it is giving me arithmetic exception, that is divide by 0. Okay. So when I do that, it's actually throwing an exception and it goes to the catch block. It is saying sums catch block. And then I do through E. Okay. So when I do through E, so it is actually going to through that exception. Therefore, it's printing arithmetic exception divide by 0 and it is printing the stack traced. Okay. Now what I have done is I have actually commented out throw E. So when I am not throwing exception, you see it's not printing a stack trace because I'm already handling it in a catch block and whatever I need to do it, I'm doing it there on. Okay. So if I don't do throw exception, so the exception will not be propagated to main. Okay. And now let me try one thing more. Since I'm doing throw exception, now let me just, do try catch over here also where I'm calling it. So if I do a try catch over here, you can see the impact. So I'm simply printing mains catch block. Now let me try to just run this. So now you see the catch block of some method got printed, then the catch block of main method also got printed. Why so? Because I'm doing throw E. Fine. Now let me try something else also. Let me, have one more class. So the thing that I'm doing now is nowhere related to exception rethrowing, but it's just an important point that came to my mind right now and I think we should do that. So I'm creating a class. The name of the class I'm giving is subclass and it will actually extend this class, which is exception rethrow demo. And now let it override the sum method. Okay. So far all good. We can override the sum method by passing the same definition. Let me, instead of doing sum a plus b, let me do a plus b plus 5. So this is just a random change that I'm making to differentiate some of the definition. And rest of the stuff I'm doing same. And just to, make the text clear, let me do it like subclass. Let me add subclass preceding it so that we get to know that this is getting printed from the subclass. Same goes with this. Okay. So far no problem. Let me just try to run it. Again, since I'm calling the sum method of the same class from the main, so this is what will print. So now I have changed the exception to arithmetic exception in my sum method of my superclass. Now let me call this. Firstly, let me create an object of subclass over here. Fine, now let me call the sum method of subclass. Fine, so you can see I'm calling sum method of subclass. Now let me run this program. You see, if I run this program, the subclass things are getting called. So over here, we are actually calling subclass C.12 and then we are doing subclass some catch block, which is fine. Now let me, remove the try catch and let me try to do throws instead of using try catch. So let me do a similar thing. So I'm actually simply throwing my exception which I was actually handling using a try catch. Okay, now let me also remove try catch from here, and let me also do throws instance I was throwing the arithmetic exception. Let me throw the same exception. Getting some error, let me check if it's a bracket error or something that I want to show you. Well, okay, it's not a bracket error, so this is something I want to show you. Let's see what this exception says. It says exception is not compatible with the throws clause in exception rethrow demo sum. So what does it mean by? It means whenever you are having a subclass and it is having a method that is getting overridden in it from the superclass, then the overridden method cannot throw a broader exception. What do you mean by broader exception? Let's say if this is throwing a arithmetic exception. So this thing can either throw a arithmetic exception or a exception that is a subclass of arithmetic exception. So if I do this over here, I need to just remove static over here. Now you can see that it is not giving me an error. Well, this could be just because of bracket issue. Yeah. Now you can see it's not giving me any error. Why so? Because actually I'm throwing the same exception. Okay. Let me just throw an exception over here, and from subclass let me throw a arithmetic exception. So this will work also fine. Why so? Because your superclass method can throw a broader exception, but your subclass method can only throw either a same exception or an exception which is less broader, means which is a subclass. So over here arithmetic exception is a subclass of exception, so my subclass can throw it. Okay. So this is a thing that I wanted to show you. Let's go back to our tutorial. Okay, so the topic that we are seeing now is creating your own exception. So this is kind of exercise. I don't have a much of theory for it. That's why I've written some of the steps that we need to do. Let's read what are the steps. First is let's create our exception. We will call it a bad food exception. This exception will be thrown when bad food is encountered. Okay. Now creating and enclosing a class myException and main method which will remain empty for now. Okay. Then we'll create a method checkFood. It takes a string argument and throws our exception. Okay. If it doesn't like the food it was given. Otherwise, it tells us that it likes the food. You can add any food you aren't particular fond of list. Now in main method, you will get command line argument out of string array and then pass the string on to checkFood. Because it's a checked exception, the checkFood method must declare it and the main method must handle it. Using try catch. Do not have main declare the exception because if the main ducks the exception, who else is back there? Try to catch. As a nifty in exception handling is, it is still up to the developer to make proper use of it. Exception handling makes organizing our code and signaling problem easy. But exception handlers still have to be written. You'll find that even the most complex situation can be handled and your code will be reusable, readable and maintainable. Well, this is the exercise that I'm keeping it for you. So I want you to try out by following the steps. As of now, I'm also going to try creating my own exception, but not by following this example. I'll try to do another example. Okay, so let's go to our Eclipse IDE. Okay, so now let me create a class over here. So the name of the class is myExceptionDemo and let me have a main method inside it. Inside a main method, let me do something. Okay. Let me take user input first of all. Now let me fetch something out of scanner. And let me store it into a string. Okay. Now, user can enter anything. Let's say my program is something that wants a user to enter a string, and let's say my program wants user to enter the name of a country from India, USA or Canada. Okay. So if my user is entering any of these three, I'm fine. I'm doing some processing out of it. But if my user is not entering country which is out of the scope of India, Canada or USA, then I'll be throwing an exception. So let me do that. So I'm ignoring the case since for me the case doesn't matter. Fine. I have to do some processing. Over here, I don't care about processing, so I'm simply writing do processing. So whatever processing my code wanted to do, it will do. Okay, for now, I want to show you examples of exceptions. So I'm more concentrating over there. So in case of else, let it throw an exception. But what exception I want to throw it? Because if I just do throw new exception, then actually in this case, you see there is no system generated exception. Okay, so I have to even add a throws clause over here. So you see, I don't have actually a system generated exception over here, because if my country is India or USA or Canada, it's fine. If it's otherwise, actually it doesn't make a sense to throw simply an exception. Why so? Because this exception is used by Java to throw actually some kind of a exception if it occur at runtime. But since this is the kind of exception which I want to throw, which is a user defined exception. So let me define my own exception over here. So if I define my exception, let me name my exception as invalid input country, or I just short it out because it's sounding too big. So I'll do INV for invalid. Then for input, I'll do INPT, and for country, let me do it CNTRY. Okay, so this is invalid for country. I think it's fine. Invalid input country exception. But actually, I haven't anywhere defined this exception right now. Let me remove this, and okay, now it's saying me create a class invalid input exception, country exception. So this is what I have to do. Since I want to define my own exception, so I have to create a class. Okay. So let me do it manually just to show you. So I'll go to my default package and I do new, and then I do class, and then I create this class. Now since it's a kind of a exception, so that's why let my class extends exception class. Okay. Now since it is, extending the application exception class, I can do anything that I want. Now, whatever I want to do, I can do it in a constructor. So I can create any number of constructor. Over here, I'm creating a default constructor. Then I can create even a parameterized constructor over here. Okay, let me add a body to the constructor because the constructor must have a body. Write something out. So what I'm doing is I'm printing please enter country from India, USA or Canada. Fine. So this is something I want to do. And in my, constructor with a parameter, let me also print the same statement, but let me also print the message that user has entered. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually printing the message. Okay. So you see I have two constructors. So depending upon how I want to throw exception, I can choose. So now it's not giving me an error because it's not giving me the same error that this class is unknown. Rather it's saying, okay guys, so you can see I have created the my class that is showing some of the exception defined by me, and then what I'm doing is I'm actually having two constructor. In first constructor I'm printing out please enter the country from India, USA, Canada. In second constructor I'm printing out with message. And you must have noticed that I have also used super. Why so? Because it's an exception. And since it's an exception, so whenever it is called by using a throw keyword, I actually want to, use the exception class to call the super constructor. So firstly, the super constructor will be called, and after that, my exception will be thrown. Okay. Now let me go back to my main exception demo class and let me try to run this. So you see I have actually used an else case throw new exception and I'm using the throws clause above. So the country that I'm going to pass an argument is China, and let me just run this code. To run our code, so you can see I have also added number of system.out statement over here. So just to show you like doing processing and over here throwing an exception. So simply I've added and I'm also printing the input. Let us run this, and to run this, I'll go back to the console and give some user input. Let me do China. Okay. So you see, first of all, it printed my country, which is China, and then it directly gone to the else clause, and over here, it is actually printing throwing my this exception, and it is saying exception in thread main. And the exception that is showing is please enter the country from India, USA, and Canada. This is something I have mentioned over here. Since I'm not passing any message, that's why it's printing simply that, and then I'm also calling a super constructor. So because of super constructor, it is also throwing an exception in thread main. Fine. Okay, now I have done a small change. I have commented out call to super. Okay, so I'm not calling a super constructor. And everything else is same. Now let me run it over again. So if I just run it again and let me pass China again, you see the changes that it's saying China exception in thread main. So it is giving me exception in main, and it is printing whatever I have printed throwing this exception, and after that it's doing please enter country from India, USA, and Canada. After that it's not printing the exception because I have removed the call it. Okay, and it is printing above that. So this was about creating your own exception. Okay guys, I hope so you have enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you very much. Let's meet in the next tutorial.